All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Welcome to On the Grind. I'm your host, Chirag T. Patel, and the T is very important. Um, this episode is brought to you by Startup Development Institute. If you are looking for mobile app development or looking for funding for your project, please go to startupdevelopmentinstitute.com. Also, this live stream is brought to you by DariusHill.com for all your video production needs, video editing needs, and live stream. Please go to DariusHill.com. Today, we got a great show. I have a very, very unique and amazing entrepreneur, the co-founder and CEO of Bitpay, Stephen Pear. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for coming out. I can probably imagine, right now, you're probably really busy. And I really appreciate your time. And what I wanted to kind of just start off with is just like get into the Bitcoin craze, right? So for me, I feel like I'm hitting the buzz right now, right? Bitcoin came out in 2009. Just the last couple of years, there's been such a big demand for it. I checked it today. It was like $12,000 for one coin.
Yeah.
It actually went up to $20,000 at one time, and I remember being $200 last year.
Yeah.
Can you just like?
Was that just last year?
That was last year. It was actually January, February was like $300-400.
Okay.
And then end of 2017, I remember hitting 20,000, and I was like, that's when everybody's antennas went up, you know. And I wanted to get your opinion on it. Like, why such a big demand? Like, why such a buzz around it? What's the value of Bitcoin? And people are just trying to figure it out. And I wanted to kind of, since this is your space, could get your opinion on that.
Well, I would say of it all is that it works. It does what it's designed to do, which is be an internet protocol for the transfer of value. So fundamentally, it works. The reason you see these surges of interest that occur every so often, and this is probably what I would say the seventh or eighth major bubble that in the time that Bitpay has been around. So, back in the early days, when we started the company, Bitcoin was trading at around $5, and so in those days the bubble was to like $30, and then and then we had a crash all the way back down to $2, and then we had another bubble to $250, and another crash back down to $65, and then another one up to like $1,100, and back down to $200. So I think what you're seeing are people that get excited about it. They see it in the news, they see the media reports, and then they say, I need to go check that out. I want to play around with that. I want to use it, maybe invest in it, or I want to, make money off of it. And so they go buy some, they get it in their wallet or on their account, and it sits there, and then they say, well, now what do I do with it?
Right, yeah.
And then the price starts to fall, and then then some of them sell. But then they hang on to it, and it doesn't go all the way to zero, and then it kind of bottoms, and then before you know it, it has another surge and another rally, and you bring these new waves of users into the platform, and they find ways to use it. And so when BitPay first started, Tony and I were excited to do 5 or 10 transactions in a day, and today we do routinely over 10,000 transactions in a day.
Yeah, I was actually reading your blog. I think the last blog you had was, did you guys do $1 billion in payment processing in 2017?
Yeah, and actually we did more than that, and we're now on pace to do about $2.5 billion annually in payments.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So, and talking about BitPay, can you give us the story? How did you come up with the idea? And your partner is Tony. Is it Gillespie?
Yeah.
Did I say that right? Okay. So he's also the co-founder in BitPay. How'd you guys come up with the idea? How'd you even hey, you know what? This sounds like interesting. You didn't, because at that time, nobody
Bitcoin
knew.
was brand new.
Yeah. You almost feel like you took a gamble on it.
Yeah, and I used to think that people that went to grad school and could focus on a really hard problem for a period of like 4 years had a great chance at solving some really hard problem and going on and starting a great company. So I would tell PhDs, use that time that you're a student to really hone in on some problem, and you could have a great opportunity to start a company. But my experience with Bitcoin was that I realized you don't actually have to be the one that solves the problem, but if you know enough about the problem domain that you can recognize when somebody has solve some hard problem or come up with some key innovation, that you can then do something around that. And that's kind of what happened with us at BitPay. And back in the 1990s, I was a fan of something called DigiCash, which is really the world's first cryptographic payment system.
Okay.
And I got very excited about that. And but the problem with DigiCash was that while it used cryptography to secure payments, it was a centrally administered system. And when the company went bankrupt, the system went away with it. And that got a lot of people thinking in the late 90s, early 2000s about how do you create a true internet protocol for value transfer that isn't dependent on one single company to operate it. And
Okay.
there really wasn't a whole lot of visible progress during that period of the late 90s to early 2000s. And then I read the computer science white paper behind Bitcoin, and I'm a computer scientist myself. And
2000.
that was late 2010. I read the white paper, and immediately I got it. I was like, they have solved this problem of this issue that DigiCash had.
That was your aha moment? Or?
Yeah, and I had heard about Bitcoin even before then. I just kind of dismissed it because of headlines and whatnot. But when I actually read the computer science white paper, I realized why mining exists and
Who wrote
what
it?
role it solves in the system. Well, it's somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto, and nobody knows for sure who that is. But at that time, I happened to be looking to get back into a startup environment. I missed that and wanted to get back to that, and was looking at, thinking of different ideas for companies. Nothing really, jumped out and grabbed me like Bitcoin did. And I got excited about it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it at that time, and that's when I started talking to Tony, who I knew from college, and he was skeptical at first, but then after a while, got very excited about it, and then one thing led to another, and we started the company.
When you started BitPay, how many coins were there? Because I think today is more than 1,000, right?
Well, there's 17 million. You mean how many coins are issued in Bitcoin?
Or because you got, I'm still learning.
Oh,
myself.
how many blockchains are there? How many different coins are there? Yeah, Bitcoin was the only one.
So I'm actually still learning myself. So you got, I know the popular ones: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. How many other coins are out there like that?
Well, I mean, you can go to a website called CoinMarketCap, and it lists, all of them ordered by, how valuable the blockchain is, and I think there's at least a couple thousand that are there.
Can you break that down a little bit, the blockchain, and why is that so critical or important with each coin?
Yeah, so blockchain technology is, I mean, it's kind of hard to define because a lot of people use that term and apply it in places where maybe it's doing something completely different from the way Bitcoin functions. But a blockchain is basically a kind of database. Think of it like a new type of database. It's a database intended to have, either open participation by lots of people that create transactions that modify that database. Right. And the role that miners serve in that system is to take all of these transactions and validate them and organize them and create a canonical history that everybody agrees upon.
Okay.
So, and also when I talk to people from the banking industry, I like to draw a parallel between all of the Bitcoin nodes that run out there it's as if you had all of these, millions of computers that are doing real-time reconciliation of their ledger with one another. Okay. And so in a banking context, different banks, when they transact with one another, they have this process of reconciling basically what happened in their two databases that could get out of sync, for one reason or another.
Or get hacked.
Yeah.
Get hacked.
Oh, well, no, I mean, just they could get out of sync because of bugs in the software.
Okay.
They have two different databases, two different systems for creating transactions in those databases. With Bitcoin, you have one system with one set of consensus rules, and you have real-time, synchronization of millions of nodes that participate in that database around the planet.
And on my research on blockchain, a lot of people are saying this could be like a very disruptive technology, and it's possibly going to change the world and how certain businesses run. And with the blockchain, it's basically, I was just talking to my friend, and he's like, this thing is unhackable, right? So once that transaction happens, it's there forever, right? And that's what Bitcoin is on. What about Litecoin and Ethereum? Is it something different?
They operate on the same principles predominantly. Litecoin is almost an exact clone of the Bitcoin software with just a few minor modifications.
Okay.
So it functions very much like Bitcoin it does. Ethereum is also the same, although it's it diverges a little bit more than Litecoin in terms of how the actual database synchronizes and how it works, how
Okay.
the blockchain is built.
Gotcha.
But it's still using proof of work. There is talk of moving away from mining and towards something called proof of stake as a consensus mechanism. But today the Ethereum network functions largely very similar to the way
Okay.
Bitcoin functions.
Can we talk about early days of Bitpay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Bitpay, you started this 2011,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you had the idea, was it before 2011 or
No, it
during
was in
that same year?
2000. Yeah, it was 2011. I mean, I read the white paper late 2010, like around the Christmas break in 2010, and
Okay.
then I started mining. And
Were you
doing a few
working
things.
full time? Like, did you have a job?
Yeah. I worked at IBM back then. Yeah.
And then, and how long did it take you to say, hey, you know what, we're going to go full time on this?
Yeah, I guess May of 2011 was when we started Bitpay, and then
And it was just you and Tony.
yeah,
And then,
we started writing the code in May, and then we launched the first version of the product in July of that year.
is Tony also a programmer?
No, he actually is a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
But he and I knew he did a lot of trading, and so he and I kind of as a hobby used to trade options and different things like that. And
So he knew.
and so
the
we
market.
we kind of kept in touch over Facebook, through that. And then I introduced him to Bitcoin, and as I said, one thing led to another. We came up with the idea for Bitpay and started that in May of 2011.
In those early years, right? So you got the idea, partnered with your friend,
Mhm.
basically. Now you're trying to scale the company.
Yeah.
Can you give us like just a rundown or maybe a breakdown of how that happened? Right? You had from day one. Now you got the vision. How'd you take it there?
Yeah, so the first step was he and I really figuring out what we wanted to do. And I remember Tony writing a very long email to me saying, we should basically take, Bitcoin and make it easy for businesses to use it as a form of payment. Because Bitcoin functioned unlike anything they were used to. It was
Right.
very different from a credit card transaction. And so, an e-commerce company has their APIs that they talk to with their, credit card processor.
Mhm.
What we decided to do was see if we could, basically mimic that same API, give them an API into BitPay, and then we'll handle all the details of the Bitcoin side of that transaction, so that from the business side, from the company's side,
Yep.
it looks and functions like something they were familiar with. So that was the basic idea. So once we had and the reason there are a lot of different reasons we settled in on that idea. We felt like it's really using the technology. It's not just a tool for traders or speculators. It's actually applying the technology for what it was intended, which is payments. And so we felt like we could get businesses on that platform, learn what they needed, and then iterate the product from there. At the time, even in 2011, there were already exchanges. We felt like exchanges were going to be rapidly commoditized and their profit margins kind of squeezed. And as it turns out, exchanges are very profitable even today. The top ones, there's a long tail of a lot of other
Yeah.
exchanges. We don't make a lot of money, but
They're
the big
making
ones
per
make
transactions.
a ton of money.
Off transactions. Exchanges.
They charge a fee every
Yeah.
time somebody goes in there and executes an
Commissions.
order. They make a commission on that. So we settled in on the idea. We felt like it was a good idea, and we just built the product and went out there and got customers. BitPay is the fourth startup that I've been a part of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the
Okay.
second one as a co-founder, and then two others where I was just an early employee. So I learned a lot from having been in a startup environment before, what you should do and should not do in terms of your cap table and all that kind of stuff. Just making sure that we dotted all the I's and crossed the T's when it came to the formation and the establishment of the company. We both had a sense that if this works, and it survives, that a year, 2, 3 years down the road, there's going to be venture capital coming into this space, and they're going to be seeking out companies that they can invest in. And it turns out we were right about that, and so some of those early decisions that we made, things like not letting your uncle, invest like $20,000 and now he's in your cap table,
Right?
Stuff like that.
So in the when you were in the beginning days, did you invest your own money to get it started up?
Yeah, Tony and I, in fact, we were a payment processor, so people paid with Bitcoin, and then we had to settle to merchants, sometimes in Bitcoin, but oftentimes in dollars or euros or whatnot. And so
Right.
he and I just decided that we would split that 50-50, and he and I were buying all the Bitcoins in those early days.
And you said it was $5 back then?
Yeah. So this is how Tony and I, acquired a good portion of our own Bitcoin investments, was buying it from Bitpay in those early days before we tied into the exchanges and whatnot.
Okay.
Today, we're tied into the exchanges, and at some point along that journey, our volumes got to where Tony and I could no longer afford to buy all the Bitcoins that were coming
absolutely.
into the platform.
Can you talk about that growth? Like from those days till today, because right now, I mean earlier you said you still have a lot of work to do, but I think you are a major leader in this space. I don't know any other payment processors for Bitcoin or growing that fast. Like any successes, challenges you want to talk about, growing pains that maybe you can elaborate on a little bit?
The biggest, I would say the biggest mistake that we have made along the way was when that venture capital came into play, and we took our Series A round of funding. At that time, Bitcoin was trading over $1,000, and it looked like everything was just taken off.
Right.
And this is 2013.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden the price slid downward, and we grew, probably too fast, and so we outgrew. We had a high burn rate at that time, but the growth in terms of revenues wasn't there to sustain our hiring.
Right.
And so we had a tough couple of years where we had to make some corrections, and just.
Did you ever feel like, because at that time, I don't know, like I feel a lot of people say Bitcoin is just a fad.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but I'm a believer.
Stop being a fad. I mean, it's been around since 2009.
Right, but a lot of people are just hearing about it now,
Yeah.
and they're like, they're jumping on the wagon or whatever, and some people are skeptical, and some people are true believers. Did you ever feel like, this is not going to work at any point?
There were times I can remember where I was sure that Bitcoin would be there and would work and would function.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure that, we could build a sustainable company, that we could build a real business around it. And this is before like the Series A. And so I can remember having some of those doubts, and then I would. And the great thing about having co-founders, you go talk to the co-founder,
Right.
he's in the opposite mood, right? He's like
Let's do
got
it.
ready to go, and then so that it was good from that perspective, because I knew that I could always go talk to Tony, and he would get me excited and optimistic about things.
Got a good partner.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to talk about the execution piece, and not like you gave us a lot of information, but like as personally, right? It takes a lot of energy, a lot of work.
Yeah.
To especially the beginning days when you just have a startup and you try and bring it to life. Can you break down your like daily schedule when you were trying to scale this company, like the amount of hours you put into it?
Back in 2011, it was common that we were up till 2-3 o'clock in the morning working on the product. Tony did a lot of the front end design work, and I did the back end, the back end of the website. So he and I wrote the first version of Bitpay. And there were a lot of days where it's like go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, get back up at 7 or 8, and keep going. But what was important back then was we set some deadlines for ourselves and really marched toward those deadlines, and that forced us, from just a software engineering perspective and a development perspective, it really forced you to cut scope and think about what was really important, what you needed to deliver. And it's all about shipping code, right? It's all about getting a product fielded and into the hands of customers. If you don't do that, you don't have anything. So we had to be very self-disciplined about putting, dates and deadlines in front of ourselves so that we could, force ourselves to ship because there's nobody else forcing us to
Yeah,
ship.
absolutely.
Right.
You're responsible
Yeah.
for everything. Okay. Stephen, I want to get to know you more like on a personal level, right? It's kind of, I just have some random questions. Just answer them with whatever comes to your mind.
Okay.
Name 3 people that inspire you.
Oh gosh. I mean, there are all kinds of people that are, worthy of being inspired by, right? In terms of running a software company, I always think about Steve Jobs and a lot of the, quotes I often think back to in terms of how he ran and sort of spearheaded Apple.
Absolutely.
So that's one that definitely leaps to mind. Other people like Peter Thiel, he's one of our investors. What they were able to do with PayPal, and then how he still works. Like, like I remember
He's got the
having,
passion though.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
that's why.
Big ideas. I love the big ideas that they have. I can't remember when it was, but talking to one of our investors from when Conversation of Founders Fund and Peter Thiel first started coming up, somebody made a comment that I don't know if it was in the context of trying to get Peter to come out and do a talk or do something or visit or whatever, and somebody made the comment, Peter doesn't do that. He works. He doesn't have time for that kind of stuff. So other inspirations. I don't know. There's so many people and so much wisdom you can draw from so many people. It's hard to pinpoint.
We could leave it as 2.
Yeah.
Are you a music fan?
Yeah, but I'm not a music expert. I just listen.
Have a song that motivates you or gets you pumped up and feel like you can do anything?
I go through phases. I
Yeah.
like all kinds of music, so I listen to all sorts of different stuff. From hard rock to country music, right, and everything in between.
Or a favorite artist?
Favorite artist. I mean, fairly recently, I was, listening to White Zombie again. I used to listen to them back in the '90s, and then I guess when I was in high school, I used to listen to Metallica.
Right. Classic.
More recently, I've been listening to a lot of country though, and classic country, not the newer stuff.
Okay.
So,
is there an app or a technological tool that you can't live without?
that I can't live without.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say that I can live without my phone, but I can't.
Can't.
Yeah. I'm always on Slack and communicating with people at work over Slack, and that's probably the one tool. And Signal, and of course email. I mean, there's all the communication.
Sometimes you got to take an email vacation.
Yeah.
And just detach from all the technology right
I
now.
once heard somebody say they had a term, declaring email bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It's like when your inbox just gets so big that you're like, I'm just deleting everything. And I've always liked that term.
Your favorite restaurant?
I like there's a Mexican place up near where I live called La Paria.
Okay. I got one next to me too.
Yeah.
In your life so far, what year did you work the hardest and why?
Yeah, the last 6.
But it's probably the beginning years though.
Yeah, I would say 2011.
11 when you started out?
Maybe 12.
Okay. This is what I call the golden nugget. Basically, I want once you give our audience like your best piece of advice. You started this company from an idea, build it. You're doing amazing things with it. You've learned a lot.
Yeah.
What is your greatest piece of advice you can give to entrepreneurs out there that they can use in their journey?
Yeah, I would say always. Well, if you're talking about just being successful and making a company successful, little things like deadlines, keeping lists of things that you need to do, and just knocking them out and pushing through. Never giving up. Keep at it. Like I said, this was my fourth startup, right?
Yeah.
So, second one as a co-founder, and the previous one wasn't all that successful, and you're going to be met with a lot of rejection, I guess, and no's, and you just have to learn to push through that. You're going to have a lot of people that doubt your ability, and doubt you, and you just can't let that get to you. Stay positive, right?
Persistence.
But I would say also, keep in mind what's important. One of the things I like to say at Bitpay is that my definition of a successful person, the best definition I've ever heard of a successful person, is somebody that makes the people around them successful.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that. And when I think about Bitpay and what do I want for Bitpay, what do I want out of that, I think more than anything, I want everybody that's invested either time or money into Bitpay, for them to have a successful outcome, and also for it to become a company that the city could be proud of, and proud that it calls the city home.
Absolutely. I was reading an article. They installed 100 Bitcoin ATMs in Atlanta. Did you know about that?
I hadn't heard about that. No.
It was in Hippopotamus,
Okay.
maybe a month or two back.
Yeah.
But I thought that, and we're the only city, I think, or the city with the most Bitcoin ATMs.
Yeah.
I think there's New
That's
York.
great.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think there's New York and LA. But I thought that was a great piece. Last question, Stephen. You play many roles in your life, from a man to maybe a husband, brother, son. What type of legacy do you want to leave behind, and how do you want people to remember you as?
Just, I guess, somebody that genuine and did his best.
Absolutely.
I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Stephen.
Nice talking to you.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming out and for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
So which camera was it? Was it